Welcome to A Mason's Work, the podcast where we review Masonic symbols and illustrate how they can be used to solve problems in everyday life. With your host, Brian Mattox, a proud member of the Craftsman Online Media Network.
So this week we're going to be talking about the Senior Warden. And as you may recall, as we've gone through some of the other roles in the lodge, it's productive mentally to imagine, sort of from a contemplative place, that the lodge room is almost like a big opportunity to role play. So you sit in any one of the chairs as a function, because the lodge is organized like sort of ancient work crews. You'll sit in a job or a role and use that to help you analyze your behavior, your relationships, the systems that you're interacting with in the world. So as we look at some of these, the role is going to be more obvious than others. And the Senior Warden is a relatively obvious role in that it is explicitly stated in the rituals in almost every jurisdiction that the Senior Warden's job is to close the lodge, pay the craft their wages if any are due, and see that none go away, dissatisfied or upset. But what does that really sort of functionally mean? How does that work? So if there was ancient work crews, if there were folks that were interacting in that kind of work environment, your Senior Warden was the guy who's, making sure that, all of the sort of contract terms, for lack of a better way to say it, were honored and met. So the quality of the work was appropriate, that that it essentially was useful in the function of the building or whatever, and then you would get paid, right? It wouldn't necessarily be the paymaster, right? That might be somebody else, but they would authorize sort of that payment. Now, again, we don't have a ton of insight as to how these crews actually worked and whether or not they literally modeled this operatively in sort of everyday life. It doesn't really matter. We're using this in a sort of speculative / operative way. We're using it to work on ourselves operatively, but as an idea, as a concept. So when we look at these things, we're really getting to this understanding that every one of these folks played a role in a conceptual sort of building construction operation. And so Senior Warden's role was to make sure, again, that the work was sort of worthy of its pay. But fundamentally, what it really makes sure to do, the Senior Warden makes sure to do, is to close. It's the functional process of closing out. It's closing out the account balance. It's terminating a relationship. It's bringing closure to a situation so that everyone leaves that situation, all the parties that are involved in whatever transaction that might be, sort of got what they needed, wanted, could out of the situation. And whatever context that might sort of mean for the situation as appropriate. That doesn't mean everyone's always the happiest, but it does mean that sort of the best possible outcome was created. And so when we look at our functional use of these things over the next several episodes, we're going to talk about what does that look like, again, at a behavioral level for yourself. What does it look like at a relational level? How does that work with other people? And then systemically, how do we make sure that we essentially create these lines of demarcation between actively working and closure so that we can essentially free up resource and kind of move to the next thing? When we start talking about this a little bit further in each of these places, we're going to get into some of the practices you might be able to use to essentially build out closure as a functional element of what you do. Now, again, just like the Worshipful Master, just like any of the roles in the lodge, as the Senior Warden, you can pick up any of the tools, any of the aprons that you need to kind of do that analysis work. So don't don't think that the senior warden itself is just, you're going to sit there sort of in reflection or meditation and be like, okay, I've got all the answers here. You may have to pick up additional tools from that position, kind of in that mental landscape, to do the work. And if you're actively working to become this sort of closure function in sort of real life, in your lodge or in your workplace, again, you'll get to some of the practices you might consider to make that more effective as you listen throughout the week.
The views represented in this podcast are those of the speaker alone and are not representative of any grand or subordinate lodge.
Hi, Brian here. I wanted to thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you have any suggestions or guidance for further episodes you'd like to see or hear, whatever the case may be, please don't hesitate to reach out to me at amasonswork.com, and we will try and incorporate your suggestions into a future recording. Thanks.
Freemasonry teaches us that the true work is within, a lifelong journey of reflection, discipline, and discovery. At A Mason's Work, we help Masons bring out their best selves through meaningful self-inquiry and symbolic practice. From personal reflection to lodge engagement, we offer tools that turn symbols into action. Visit us at amasonswork.com. The work is within. The time is now.